Put me in, coach, because I'm ready to play. And we're back once again for another episode of the Grunge Bible Podcast. This is episode number 178. And we're getting into the Bleach zone today, aren't we, Ethan?
Bleach it all. Bleach it all. Yes,
Bleach
we
it
are.
all, dude.
Yes, on today's episode, we are going to kind of talk a little bit history, macro, talk about Nirvana's first studio album, Bleach, and it's going to be fun. It'll be good. We've been listening to it the last 2 days, and we thought it's been a while since we've done some Nirvana talk and some Kurt Cobain and all that. All we do is talk about Pat Smear on here, so we figured let's go and give Nirvana, let's talk about them. And I don't think we've ever done a full album episode for Bleach. I think we picked a few songs and done a few things that we've talked about it, but this is the first.
Yeah, this is the first, and with this episode, we will complete the trifecta of Nirvana studio album reviews here on the Grunge Bible Podcast. So it only took us 3.5 years to get the last one in here, but better late than never. We'll go back to the year 1989 and discuss the mighty Bleach here. But first things first. I think that's better than if we were to just start off the first, say, 30 episodes and just go through every grunge album, because then you need them every now and then.
Yeah, we like to mix it up. We have a lot of different variety of episodes. Yeah, crazy to think about, but there is a bunch of different.
Your ammo sometimes.
There is a bunch of different sectors and stuff that we have access to. So this is being saved for a day like today.
It's like the Revolutionary War, the famous the Battle of Bunker Hill. You know, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. You know, you gotta save a couple of albums here and there for when you're backed up and they're charging up the hill. You know, when you see the whites of their eyes, you gotta have something that you can trust. And for us, that's the album reviews. So we got another one coming today. But first things first, Ethan, how are you doing today?
Oh, yes, the daily check-in. Yep. I'm doing well. I am. I'm doing good. Just worked today. Been trying to work and just kind of focused on that, which is good. It's pretty quiet here in Birmingham. People have went out of town for summer. The Olympics have now come and gone. So the season we're in a quiet time, hopefully, Try not to talk about it. I'm actually... in the Outer Banks the week that this episode comes out. I'll be in the Outer Banks with my family.
Excellent.
And that'll be good because, like we talked about before, I think we're going to outlaw typing and phone time communication. Yeah. And it's so tough, especially, and even when you travel to certain places, but if you travel to the beach with like the closest people in your life, it's pretty easy. Well, I guess mountains with anywhere, anytime you travel to an area, it's so much easier to disconnect than when you're at home. So I'm excited to be doing that next week. I haven't been to the beach yet this summer, as we talked about, which is, I don't know, it feels uncommon for me. So I'm really excited. I'm a big beach guy.
Totally. Just like the Bleach review, better late than never for Ethan getting to the beach this year.
Yeah. It's funny. August is always the time. August and everything after. That's when we go to go on vacation. So
yeah, I hear that. It's funny that you mentioned the whole screen time thing, because I agree. And like whenever I travel, my screen time probably goes down by 75%, I would say. And every single time I travel, as soon as I return home, I think to myself, it would be nice to carry some of those habits forward to my daily life and maybe not be on my phone as much. And immediately the first week that I return, my screen time returns exactly right back to what it was before. So it's not a lesson I've learned yet, but maybe this next time will be the time.
That's right. It's always the next time.
Yeah.
It's difficult. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, dude. We are recording this on a Wednesday, August 14th, so not very long after we recorded last week's episode, the Q&A. So definitely have a little pod fatigue going on. I'm definitely a little upset. The hangover that I had to, the hangover boogie by Canned Heat is still drumming along. But I'm good. Finished up work not that long ago. It's like 7 p.m. here tonight. So what better way to spend the one free night that I have this week than by recording a podcast about Bleach, the first album from my favorite band.
Exactly. And that is the weekly check-in. That is one of
Brought
our
to you by our sponsors.
Yeah, that is our sponsor. Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad we do that every week. And yeah, that weekly check-in is always powered by our League of Patreon supporters. So if you are listening to this, thank you so much for checking it out. If you've been a long-time listener, thank you for sticking around. And we do have a way that you can support us, and that is by donating $2, $5, or $10. Pretty much, it's just to support us, to keep us chugging along. There are random stuff that you need to pay for throughout the year, like website and transferring files and different logins and whatnot. So just know that that's what you're helping out.
Absolutely. Yeah, it takes a village here. And also the additional caveat to it, if you're interested in joining, we've started this new program recently where if you join the Patreon
initiative.
It's an initiative. It's an operation. It's a campaign, if you will. It's,
phase one.
It's an election year. It's a campaign. We're out there. Shoe leather is our secret weapon. We're knocking on doors, kissing babies, shaking hands. Kissing hands and shaking babies too, perhaps. The rules by now. If you join the Patreon at any level, by the time this episode is released, if you're the first one to join, we will hit you up and we will ask you what you want us to do an episode on, and we will do it. No topic, and I could be kicking myself in the future, but no topic is off limits. So we already had one taker-upper of that, and that was the holy disciple of Riff Lord Jerry 69, who joined at the top tier, and that holy disciple is accompanied in the top tier by the following individuals who we like to thank every week. And they are What the Fuck Is Up Denny's, Sherry Matthews, Russell, Seattle 4 fanboy from New Jersey, Pile of Punk, who's back after a brief hiatus, Nikki 6, Millie, King Buzzo Stole My Hair, Carlene Salona, Keith White, Jade Mercado, Jamie Lynn, Granny Grunge, Gochu John, Apona, Fuck Soup, Eddie Vedder got me through my second divorce, Down in a Hole, Flat Out Fucked, D-Boat, Kara K, Douglas Endy, and Black Hole Sean. So thank you all. We also have a fan mail section of the podcast here. Always love getting these. They really warm my heart. And
shows up every once in a while.
Yeah, you never know when they're going to come through. And this is one that we needed. So we got this message over on our website from somebody who's enjoying the pod. And they wrote in, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude for the incredible work you do on the Grunge Bible podcast. I stumbled upon it about a month ago, and I've already made my way through episode 40. Your engaging discussions accompany me during my runs, and on days when I don't run, I find myself missing the energy and camaraderie you bring to each episode. Especially during periods when life gets me down, turning on your podcast helps me escape and find joy. Your conversations evoke laughter and reflection, transporting me back to the best years, the 90s, while also celebrating the music that continues to resonate with me today. I consider myself fortunate that my career involves management of suites at 2 major arenas, which allows me to witness a diverse range of musical performances. However, my heart truly belongs to classic rock and 90s era shows, and I'm eagerly anticipating the upcoming Pearl Jam concert in town the next month. I felt compelled to reach out and let you know how much you uplift my spirits and undoubtedly the spirits of many others. Thank you for your dedication and passion. Please keep up the fantastic work. There's also a PS here. We told the future, evidently. And they go on and say, PS, in episode number 33, you mentioned Something in the Way as a fitting choice for a psychological thriller. It's remarkable that this song ended up being the main theme for Batman, released in 2022. So a year ahead of time, we called the shot, man, and we knocked it down for a dinger. And that feels good, but not as good as that message felt. So to anybody who's at any point of the Grunge Bible podcast listening journey, we hope we can do a little bit of that as we're doing for this listener. So thank you. That was good. Needed that.
Yes, I just want to applaud. I always love a good, well-written email. And you know what? It really did find me well. It did find me well.
Mm-hmm. And if it didn't find me well, I'm well after that.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's great. And that is exactly, speaking for both of us, I'm sure. I think that is our goal with this podcast. We want to
all we're trying to do.
It's all we're trying to do is be comfort in your ears and allow something that you can come back to and kind of count on. And man, yeah, it really does feel good. So That's a real one. Like I said, I love a good, well-crafted email. First time first time writer, long time listener, first time caller.
Yeah, and I love
That's awesome.
The dedication. Like it's cool to think that there's people out there that are binging the Grunge Bible podcast. I mean, we've certainly got enough episodes that we qualify for binging
in 1 month.
40 episodes in a month. Like those are some pretty solid numbers. They must be running a lot. They said they listen when they run, so they're crushing mileage, which I appreciate. And it times in because when we started the show, I was training for and I ran a marathon, so parallel trains right there a little bit. Which is pretty great. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, man, that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Really, really, really nice. So
yep.
We'll keep it up. We're gonna do our best. Yeah, we're gonna keep it up. What if speaking, since we're talking about campaigns and initiatives and whatnot, so around election day, Chris, we should have Drew mediate a debate between me and you on the podcast.
We'll have
around music, of course.
We'll have to pick like the most divisive issues in the music sphere. That's actually a fun idea.
I know,
and we release the day before the general election. I think the election falls on November. It's the November 5th, so we release on the 4th because the first Tuesday in November every year. So
yeah, I was going to say it would time up.
Yeah, so that's a good idea. Yeah, hopefully we have the bandwidth to do that in November. A lot of people are concerned about bandwidth.
I'll do it better. We're gonna do it live.
Yeah,
a live debate,
live Monday morning at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, bright and early.
We don't need to do. We don't need to do that.
Drew will have to moderate it at 3:30 a.m. Pacific.
Now that.
Hey,
now I would do a debate at 6 o'clock just to make him get up at 3:30.
Yeah, me too. Hey, you gotta do what the job tells you.
Yeah, I would totally. That's it.
Yeah.
That's everything right there.
There's an idea. I'm taking that day off of work. What do you say we get into this day in music for August 19th? How do you feel about that, Ethan?
I'd love to.
All right. Do you want to start, or do you want me to get going here?
I'll take the first one.
All right. I know it's your favorite band, so
it is my favorite band. I think it's everybody's favorite band on the Grunge Bible podcast, and it always shows up in this day in music. So in 1967, "All You Need Is Love" by the Beatles hits #1 on the charts.
Dude, this has both. It's got the Beatles and it's got the reference of the charts.
The charts are back and the Beatles are back. Exactly.
I fucking love the charts, man.
I'm assuming this is the first time it hits #1, right?
I don't know. Gotta be right. I'm not a Beatlesologist, so it's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, "All You Need Is Love." I mean, Chris,
do you agree with that?
That it should be #1 on the charts in 1967?
No, like, do you agree that all you need is love?
Ooh, I like that question. And no, I don't think that's all you need.
No, I need Zen.
I need beer. Sadly,
I need this episode to be over.
Yeah, maybe all you do need is love, but you need, I don't know. You need trust.
Makes a lot of other things a lot easier. Yeah, you need the state of love and trust together, perhaps.
Yes,
and you need the love to reign over you.
Yes, that's perfect.
But then again, also love ain't for keeping. So
yeah, Jesus is just all right with me.
He's when in doubt. Oh man, it's just gonna keep coming back. And speaking of things coming back, this next one ties into one of the more rabid obsessions we had. It burned loudly for a bit, and then it seemed to disappear as the summer wore on. But on this day in 1972, the television show The Midnight Special debuts on NBC. At first, it was just a one-off special presentation of some live music, but then it was launched into a regular show, and the mighty Wolfman Jack served as the announcer of The Midnight Special, and that's a show that we've pulled from a lot for our postings of Grunge Bible's Midnight Special, where we pick a not grunge song. The cool thing about this show is it ran from 1972 to 1981, and it kind of bucked the trend of what was typical for performances on television. So a lot of performances that you see from the 70s, they play the track and the band just kind of mimes over it. But this one was unique in the sense that they had the bands perform live. So it's twofold. You get to see the live prowess of these individuals. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, it allows us to post them on Instagram because we don't get nabbed for copyright. Hundreds of musical guests appeared on that nice run. Yeah. it was familiar to millions, and you had Wolfman Jack announcing. We need more announcers of things that don't really need announcers.
Well, that are also named Wolfman.
Wolfman Jack, yeah.
But this is a great parallel to our midnight special, because it did also start off as a one-off special presentation, and then the next year it launched into a regular show, and then all of a sudden it ended. It ran for a good bit, like 1972 to 81, something similar for the midnight specials, and then now the train doesn't roll through as very often, but sometimes it comes back.
Sometimes you got a train coming to you.
That's right. The banana boats are coming. Train's coming to you.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's a good one. That's solid.
Yeah.
Moving forward to 1988, Crazy by Patsy Cline and Elvis Presley's Hound Dog were announced as the most played jukebox songs of the first 100 years. The jukebox had been around since 1906, but earlier models had been first seen in 1989.
1889, yeah.
Did I say 1989?
It's close enough. It was around for -1 year.
Now this is a great stat to own.
I've got some questions about this though. How the
right,
hell?
It's true. This is true.
Not how the hell. How the fuck could they possibly know what the most played tracks on jukeboxes were? Like, is there
Survey
big,
says?
is there Big Juke out there, and like Big Juke is like pulling the strings and keeping tabs? Like, how are they supposed to know?
This is true, Chris, but you're just questioning it takes away the lore here.
Yeah.
We have to, the story wouldn't be as good if we couldn't really point to Crazy and Hound Dog. But you're right. It is totally arbitrary for something 125 years ago to be
that's the
accurate.
Thing. Yeah, and like everybody's talking about the accuracy of certain statistics. Obviously, I know, it is an election year, and everybody like shits themselves with fear or exaltation every time polling numbers are released. But like, how accurate are any of these numbers, man? Like, especially like who tracked the jukebox plays from 1889 to 1988. I like to think it was just some guy like in his house, and he just had like a bunch of legal pads, and he was just checking them off every time they're played.
That's awesome. That reminds me of like, it's like that comment where somebody posts a fact and be like, or someone said like, this song was listened to this many times, or it was a news thing, and somebody comments and goes like, wow, that's incredible. The world will really never know how many it was. Be like, I just told you it was exactly that. And they respond, maybe we'll just never know. We'll just never know for sure.
Yeah, it's just
that's how I feel.
Yeah, some things are just better off being mysteries, I guess.
It's
it's a little easier to track nowadays with touch tunes, I would imagine. But it just doesn't have the same allure.
Or does it? Let's look up the most played touch tune song ever.
I'm trying to find it. So they release end of year charts, but a lot of it seems to be it's broken down by genre, and it's broken down particularly by artist. So in 2023, the most played male artist on touch tunes was none other than Morgan Wallen, a stain on touch tunes, and then Taylor Swift took the top spot for the most played female artist of 2023. But I'll have to do some more digging for potentially an all-time record for touch tunes. They definitely have the data. They should release it if they haven't.
It looks like right now something that just came out on the July 17th said Shabuzi's A Bar Song leads the jukebox services ranking.
Interesting.
Next to, or Number 2 was Chris Stapleton's Tennessee Whiskey.
Classic.
So
absolutely classic.
Very diverse.
Yeah. Let's move forward to 2006. On this day in 2006, Drake made his music debut opening for Ice Cube at a show in Toronto, thus beginning the odyssey that is Drake. I don't really know much about it, but it's important. There's a lot of people out there, I guess, that like Drake.
Team Kendrick, that's all we need to know. I'm assuming you're probably K-Dot fan too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. All right. No, we'll move on from that. In 2019, on this day, this is a big one. Bass guitarist Larry the Mole Taylor dies at age 77. He is best known as the member of Canned Heat from 1967. Chris, I see you shaking your head and kind of rubbing your forehead. This one hits hard, doesn't it?
This one's tough, and
This is a tough one. I know.
For those listeners, you all know
That's why
that
I was the one who said it, 'cause you
2023,
would've- Yeah.
2023 was anointed by us as being canned heat summer. It's apparently given way to it's brat summer now this year, but canned heat summer takes the cake, and this is a tough loss, losing the mole.
The mole summer.
Yeah, it's tough. You gotta dig into that ground a little bit. So
He died
rest
before
in
his
peace.
time.
Yeah, like so many of his
Like
generation.
so many others.
in the Lord's wisdom, he took him.
Oh my gosh, he loved surfing.
He did. He explored the beaches of Southern California. You remember the Big Lebowski episode? I let in by reciting that monologue.
Oh yes.
In your wisdom, Lord, you took him.
In wisdom, Lord, the best part about that is you did it twice. We had to restart or something, and
yeah.
I
I think I was
twice.
like 4 White Russians deep, and I was definitely buzzing a little bit.
Well, of course,
it comes with the territory. So.
That's right. I think you started laughing maybe in the middle, had to restart.
Oh yeah, 100%. What do you say we close the book on this day in music history?
That was a solid one. That was one of the better
good.
ones
Had a
we've
little bit of everything.
Yeah, we got Canned Heat, the Beatles, a little Drake, and then
Wolfman Jack.
And Jukebox. Yeah, the Midnight Special and the Jukebox stats. So that was pretty solid all around. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, that is what we're looking for.
If I'm being honest.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, moving on to Bleach.
The Bleach zone. We are going to enter into the Bleach zone. So as we typically do around these parts when we discuss albums, I'm going to go on a little bit of a rambling history of the album. So Bleach, as we know, was Nirvana's first studio album, the first full-length album. It was released way back on June 15th, 1989, and it was following a November 1988 release of Love Buzz, which was their first single. It was put out on Sub Pop, and I believe, if my notes, Big Cheese was the B-side for that single. So Nirvana releases their cover of Love Buzz along with Big Cheese, and at that point, after November 1988, the band decided that it was time to get into the studio. So Sub Pop wanted an EP from Nirvana. Nirvana said, "We'll do you one better. We'll rehearse for a few weeks in early December 1988, and then we're heading into the studio." So at that time, the Nirvana lineup was Kurt Cobain, obviously, Chris Novoselic on bass guitar, and Chad Channing behind the kit. So that was the outfit that they approached these sessions with. And if I can get back to my correct spot in the notes here, I'm really struggling here today.
Not your crispest, but it's okay.
Not my crispest, but that's okay. It happens. It's a Wednesday. I'm hurting a little bit today. So most of the recording took place at Reciprocal Recording in Seattle, Washington, and they tapped the soon-to-become very notable producer Jack Endino for this project. So as I said, they rehearsed for a few weeks and had the material ready, and their first session actually occurred on Christmas Eve 1988, going into the studio for about a 5-hour stint there. They followed it up with some sessions on the 29th, 30th, and 31st of December. Look at these guys working on the holidays. They got Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve grinded in the studio, and then they wrapped it up in January with 2 more recording sessions on the 14th and 24th, 1989, before they were able to kind of, get the album all together, sent it off to Sub Pop. Sub Pop had a bunch of issues with how the album was tracked and the sequencing, so a little bit of back and forth before that ultimate release on June 15th, 1989. So this was kind of like the heyday of Sub Pop before the grunge thing broke. And this album comes out in summer 1989, and from the time it was released up until Nevermind, it sold 40,000 copies. So like, to put it in the perspective of Nirvana, that's obviously not a lot. But at the time, obviously, for, independent labels such as Sub Pop, kind of upstart, just the regional element at the time that, these bands were working with, that's pretty solid. And, it was released to a fair amount of critical acclaim, and they just kept it rolling from there. Notable to say that after Nevermind came out, Geffen Records reissued Bleach in 1992, and it reached number 89 on the Billboard 200 at that time. And as of this recording, it has sold 1.9 million copies in the United States. So obviously much greater than the 40,000 that they sold at the time. So as we said, we had that lineup of Cobain, Novoselic, and Channing. It is important to note, however, that Dale Crover of the Melvins, the kit man for the Melvins, is featured on 3 tracks: Floyd the Barber, Paper Cuts, and Downer. Those are for some earlier sessions that Nirvana had done prior to Channing and prior to the release of that initial single of Love Buzz. And the band had intended to, and actually did, record some more versions of that with Chad Channing on drums, but they ultimately decided to include the Crove Daddy and his takes of that on there. So that's kind of what we had going on here. Another notable element of this whole thing too is that although he did not play on the album, and although he was not in the band while these songs were being written and recorded, Jason Everman is also credited on the album. And the legend goes that Jack Endino charged Nirvana $606.17 for his 30 hours of production work on this. And the band was a little short on cash, but Jason Everman, apparently flush with cash at the time, liked what he had heard. And when he joined the band, he said, "Hey guys, I got this." So he paid the Endino bill. And in gratitude, the band not only credited him on the album, but also included him in the album artwork. You can see him, I believe he's on the right side of the album artwork, if I'm seeing it correctly in my head. So this is where it all began. And when you think about Bleach, Ethan, I don't know if you're in the same boat as me, but it has been a very, very long time. Maybe I never have prior to today, but it's been a long time since I listened to Bleach front to back. And this was the tone setter for Nirvana. I mean, Kurt Cobain wrote everything on this except the Love Buzz cover, obviously, and then Chris Novoselic helped out with one of the other tracks as well. But this is the Kurt show, and you can see the blueprint here. You can see the elements of Kurt and the talent that he had that ultimately blew up with Nevermind in 1991. It's all here.
Yeah, blueprint spelled BLEW, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised you haven't listened to this fully through, because once you get through the first 5 songs, you probably lose interest or lose track of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of get into that, looking at the track listings in a macro sense. So are we saying, so Sub Pop, why did they pay Endino?
I don't know.
Like,
DIY,
I feel like
man.
I feel like that's the whole, like, why even go under Sub Pop if they have to pay the people?
Who knows,
themselves?
man? It's
like
DIY. They were probably just
funny that,
pumped
like,
to be having the record come out.
3 guys. We say this a lot when bands, just like 3 guys couldn't come up with $600.
Yeah.
Like, I know times are tough and stuff, but I guess they weren't working anything. But
that's the
God
ethos
forever.
of the scene. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's so funny, and especially like how international success was only 2 years down the road for them. It's funny.
Oh, yeah.
Bruce Springsteen has a really funny anecdote of something similar. So in the really early 70s, before he and the E Street Band got together and found their groove and found their success, they were struggling the same way. And they were based in New Jersey at the time, obviously. And they had kind of connected with a guy who had moved to New Jersey from California, who had done some promoting work. And this guy got them a New Year's Eve gig in Big Sur, California. And they had like 4 or 5 days notice. And between the entire band at the time, who I think they were rolling 5 or 6 or 7 deep, Bruce says, we saved up all of our money until we had $100, and they did 3,000-mile days heading westward in a convoy to get out to play that gig. And that's just part of it, when you're making your way. Money's short, but the energy is long, and I think that definitely shines through on this record. But yeah, it is a funny anecdote. I think that it's definitely one of my favorite parts about Bleach.
It's like, if Sub Pop wasn't going to pay the people, then you almost wish they. But I guess for the lore, it's good they signed with them. But
Well, that's the best part about the lore. I mean, and you have to think too, like Sub Pop. I mean, Bruce Pavitt and Jonathan Pondman, like they sold a bunch of their own shit just to make Sub Pop happen. So I can't imagine that they were necessarily rolling in the cash at the time either. So, and you can tell, like, I mean, Sub Pop, they were churning out all of these independent releases, and obviously operating in a very fertile ground musically in the late '80s in the Pacific Northwest. But this seems to really fit the mold of like a lot of the stuff that Sub Pop was putting out at the time, from a production standpoint, from a genre standpoint, and just like the feeling that you get when you listen to it. I mean, there's some stuff that that they have. There's some stuff that Mudhoney has, and there's even some Soundgarden tracks from the mid '80s and whatnot that are really emblematic of that time, and they all kind of sound very similar in the way that they come across. So I felt like that was an interesting thing to realize, and obviously Nevermind, far more commercially polished, I would say more accessible, of course. And I have to imagine if Nevermind was produced and put out the same way that Bleach was, I don't maybe think that it would have been as successful, but it's part of the lore, it's part of the story, the beginnings.
Yeah, one thing I love about Bleach, I love that it came out in '89. I don't know why. Going back to bands that are '90s bands and seeing that, I remember seeing when Soundgarden and these
in the mid '80s,
they played in the '80s. Like, that's really telling. Obviously, it's before the surge of '90s music and what became '92, '94, and how the landscape really changed. So when you see an 8 next to it, like, you usually have a general idea of where the music's coming from. Or like what the scene was like, and that's this album in a big way. It's very clear that it's heavy, and there was like a lot of sludge, but it's not like the like the Nevermind stuff. Like, this is the beginning of the band, and you can hear a lot of it. And looking back, I think it is a really solid first album. It's really cool, and it's like you said, the blueprint. I mean, you probably listening and you're like, I hear and see all the potential. If we get these guys going, have them play, get a new drummer, not that Chad. So I wrote down, I was like, it emphasized the importance of Dave Grohl. And knowing what we know now, Dave Grohl is an incredible songwriter, lyricist, instrument musician, and does all these things. And Chad was awesome, but you got to think that, like, when Dave came into the band, there's probably so many things that he brought to the band and kind of changed without even really probably being vocal. I'm sure that he was very vocal about stuff, but and when you add certain members to bands, like, it changes. There is a big dynamic, and just the way that they interact and like what you do, how you hang out, probably affects your music. So I'm like listening to this, and you just see you can see the difference between the music later, and like although Dave likes playing heavy, but some of the stuff is really, really sludgy and heavy.
Yes,
like that. The second half of the album is like, it becomes one big song, really.
Yeah, I would agree, and that was something that was surprising to me, listening through it the last few days to prepare for this episode, is just kind of how sludgy and heavy and slow it is. Because when I think of Nirvana, and even like the conception I had in my head about Bleach is like, oh yeah, like they were a punk band, and then Nevermind.
That's a great point. Yeah,
they became a lot more commercially polished for that, but it was punk and it was pop. But I mean, there's a lot of sludge here, and I think that is a testament to the type of music that was coming out on Sub Pop. I mean, you had like Green River, you had Mudhoney, you had some of the earlier Soundgarden stuff, not to mention a lot of the other bands. And I think the through line there is like, it's Endino. I mean, Endino worked on over 70 different projects for Sub Pop between 1987 and 1989. And like, honestly, there's kind of some historical parallels here between like the Sub Pop sound, if you want to even call it that, prior to the Seattle sound or the grunge sound, where the production techniques were definitely the same, quick turnarounds. I mean, they didn't spend that much time in the studio for this. I mean, apparently it only cost them $606 to do, and there's a lot of parallels, I think, between like that and a lot of the stuff you saw in the 50s and 60s with like the wall of sound and the Brill building, in different music and pop music that kind of came 30 years before this. So it was interesting, and I hadn't really considered that a whole lot, and just how much of a fingerprint that you can see on this album. Because there's some of these tracks, honestly, that like I'll listen to it and be like, this could very easily have come off of a Green River record, or a Mudhoney record, or Tad or something. It's just it's funny that but even through all of that, even through how and I don't mean this as a negative, but how homogenous a lot of this music sounds, you can still see some elements. And for me, with Bleach, the choruses really shine. And like, I think Kurt, like, one of Kurt's greatest attributes was his ability to write a hook, and his ability to create catchy melodies and great choruses. And you see that on here, even from the beginning, with that kind of like standardized production technique that was employed. Like, there's some very Nirvana stuff going on, or stuff that rather I would say we would all come to know as being very Nirvana.
Right.
A lot of the power chords, the sludge, and just Kurt's voice too.
Yeah, right. The first time you're listening to this, you don't know that it's going to be a through line through all of their albums. And, Jack Endino, people forget that he played guitar in Skin Yard for like
people forget
7 years, so he was in Skin Yard. We get a lot of messages saying that they were the first grunge band, or, got to listen to post more Skin Yard and all this.
Yeah.
And
definitely more important than I think a lot of people, a lot of casual listeners would think,
Yeah.
And he certainly made his mark here.
Yeah. The bands that made it in the 90s were listening to those bands in the 80s. And so the people that were kind of, venturing off the paths during the 80s are what ultimately influenced the people that got us to our destination in the 90s that we all are very thankful for.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that Dale Crover played drums on 3 songs, and they kept that in. I mean, the Melvins is a huge, like, I listened to those songs. I'm like, oh yeah, like this is the Melvin. this is a Dale drumming track if I've ever heard one. And you're right when you talk about how you think they're really punk. Like when you think of punk, you think of fast, but like,
yeah,
this is not fast. This is slow. This is sludge. And you're exactly. Of course there are some faster songs, but like that idea that it's like, this is like slow, heavy, and just they're banging on the drums, and the guitar is loud. And I thought that was a really good point. Very slow rock. Slow, heavy.
And I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't considered it, but like when you look at this album through that context, it really starts right at the beginning with Blue, which is, I think it's got to be my favorite track off of Bleach. I think I've said that before. And kind of like a happy accident that happened here. Kurt and Chris Novoselic had intended to tune their instruments down to make it a little heavier, but they hadn't realized that when they went to tune down, they were already tuned down, so they ended up in drop C tuning, and it's just one of those happy accidents that one, I think it sounds better, and secondly, it really sets the tone for the rest of this album. I think particularly a lot of the songs that you kind of find on the back end, the Scoffs, the Swap Meets of the World, Mr. Mustache, and Sifting, which I just posted today on the page. It's heavy and it's slow, and it's not what I remembered. I was thinking of like the About a Girls, obviously, and how it's kind of poppy, and it's it's moving through it. And some of these songs, they just start and the tone is set with Chris's bass, which he's playing way down low, and Kurt's guitar is just so fuzzy. It reminds me of the the Mark Arm quote that he said about his band. It's like, it's pure grunge, pure shit. And they were able to lean into that and make something that despite kind of inhabiting that area that a lot of other bands were inhabiting at the time, like they made it their own, and it sounds sounds good. Yeah.
The fact that they were tuning and they accidentally tuned to drop C is really funny, because like when you're tuning, obviously you're paying attention to what you're doing, because that's the whole point of tuning. Is to look, you're looking at it while you're doing it.
Right.
Maybe they're doing it by ear, but like, oh my gosh, that's just a funny instance. And of course Nirvana like accidentally tuned it too low, and that's really great. I mean, when I look at this album, so this is one of the difficult things about looking back at an album that came out 35 years ago.
Right.
And so we're comparing it to all the other music we know. And the idea is that when this came out, it shocked people. And well, I guess it wasn't commercially, successful, but like it was a first, and it was the first look of the album, and there's a lot of potential, all this thing. So when we're looking back, we know the full story, and it's like the first TV, so I said to you yesterday, it's like first TV, very useful, awesome, so great to have. But nowadays, like, I'm not going to go back and use my old TV that much. I mean, you're going to check it out, maybe show some people that you still have it.
Yeah, there's a novelty to it.
You're collecting it. Yeah, and some people may say it's the best thing
worth
that's
some
ever
money
been, but
someday.
But the final product, the plasma TVs and the smart TVs, that's what we're using. I think that's Nevermind and some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it is a great album, but going back, you're just like, wow, like this is not Nevermind. This is different. And I like heavy stuff as much as the next person.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about this too is, like you said, you have to look at it through the lens of what it was like at the time. And a lot of the adjectives and phrases that we all use to describe Nirvana weren't really around then. I mean, if you look at when Love Buzz came out, which was the first single in November of '88, it's a shocking blue cover. Sub Pop marketed it using the term heavy pop sludge, which is really, really interesting because, grunge wasn't a thing yet. And now this is, that sound has been co-opted by the grunge term, obviously. And that ended up, coming to mean so many different things after 1991. But something that was interesting when I was looking back to this time period, and once again, thinking about it through the lens of the time versus what people consider now, like when people think about Kurt, particularly when he plays live, you kind of have this concept of somebody who's like just kind of over it, and just is like really sarcastic and is just like, all right, like whatever, couldn't care less. But when you go back and watch some of the performances from Nirvana of 88, 89, and 90, like this is somebody who is working really, really hard and plays with a lot of ferocity. I think, that's the golden ticket right there with Nirvana. That when you combine the fact too that like, myself included, there's a lot of people that like, sometimes in jest, sometimes not, like shit on Kurt for like not being a good guitarist, right? But he was incredibly talented and really intelligent, and really, really gifted with writing and performing. A lot of his licks and his riffs that, there's some solos on here that I had forgotten about or I really hadn't been aware of at the time. And, when you think of that over the top of the fact that he wrote them, over the fact, that he's singing and, his voice is really, really distinct and really, gives it an edge on here. It kind of dispels that like false conception I had about Kurt that, he's just kind of always been over it and like doesn't really care that much. Like, I mean, he was playing hard and the band sounded great and they had a lot of energy. I mean, Novoselic's always jumping around like a crazy man on the stage. And, at the time Channing was playing great, and obviously all hell breaks loose when Grohl joins the band, a couple of years later.
Yeah, I think that I saw an interview of Jack Black, it's like 10 years ago, and he was actually commenting on Nevermind's 20th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And, he talked about how his first listen, and he was talking about Nevermind, of course, but he said, like, yeah, it was very shocking, or, it's very like these kids have something, but he talked about how, like you said, the shows, the band brings a lot of energy, but the reason they brought a lot of energy and they could do that is because the crowds matched the energy and brought so much to it. And so I imagine that when they're playing this album and they're breaking out, like there probably was so much feedback from the crowd, and they probably caught on to the fact that like, this is what teenagers are looking for. This is everything. And then they were able, like you said, Kurt, he can write good hooks and pops. And they knew that like, if we could harness this, what I mean? I think it was like, let's give the people what they want and make it so they can interact and, feel very a part of the show. Mm-hmm. And like, they just ran with it. And
yeah.
And I think that this album like had, like you said, the blueprint, you know what I mean? It's like, it's very clear. And I think that like when they were playing live and playing stuff, like it just was like, the end goal became so much clearer each time that, or as the time passed, it was like, all right. And I think that is why, you could just hit home runs for the next two albums.
Absolutely. You can very clearly see the beginning of the phenomenon of Nirvana on this album. And it's got just enough DIY-ness to it, I think.
Oh yeah.
And like for example, I mean, so many of these tracks, like Blue is a favorite of mine. The studio track of About a Girl, which most people know from the Unplugged performance, but I mean, this one, it's got a really great hook, as I said, and it's just got that sound to it that we're talking about. And you know, there's just so many great tracks, I think, where the musicians are serving the song. Like School, for example, you know, that's one that I really, really enjoy, and that's a great hallmark, as we said, of just how heavy Nirvana was at the beginning. And it wasn't just, you know, quick power chords and, you know, crazy drumming. It kind of got down low a little bit, which is something that, you know, I'm always kind of drawn to in particular. So it's interesting to go back and notice that again.
Yeah, School is a really, really solid song. I think it's simple, you know, but also like riveting. I think it's like simply put. Get a really nice chorus and hook for what it is. The first five songs or whatever up to Love Buzz are just like really solid and deserves a lot of playlist time. Not saying the back half, Paper Cuts, Negative Creep and whatnot don't, but they decided to get really heavy and really, I don't know, experiment with like I don't want to say sloppiness, but they were pushing the envelope on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they totally were.
And I think that was fun. You know, it's like when you're playing with your friends and you're say recording stuff, I mean, it is so fun to be chaotic in and this is like, you know, the youngest that they're going to be in their history. So like, they just want to like explode. And I think that's why, you know, I talk about my dad, or when we listen to music and I show him something new and he'd be like, you know, I would have liked that when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I think that is that's why bands, you know, transition and change. And it's like when you're younger, that's what they want to play too. And that's why young people like certain sounds. And it's like, this is something that, like if I was a teenager when this came out, you bet your ass I'm headbanging and I'm going to shows. It's just bump into people now and go to shows. It takes a lot for me to like want to get into a pit.
Right.
But I'll do it. But back in the day, like any chance to go and be sweaty with a group of people now, you know, it's just not as appetizing.
Yeah, there's that energy there, and all of these songs on this album are really, they serve as really great conductors for that energy. And one track in particular that I want to shout out is Negative Creep. Like everybody always talks about Kurt and his voice and like how his voice could be kind of abrasive and, you know, all the screaming and everything. But I mean, Negative Creep kind of takes it to a whole new level. I mean, it's low, it's loud, it sounds so strained and heavy. And it's not something that, you know, I think of when I think of like the Nevermind era of Nirvana. But I love that line where it's like, you know, this is something that I'd really get into when I was younger. And I can't help but think of a parallel to a question that we had last week, talking about Pearl Jam's evolution from the earlier stuff.
Right.
And that's just the thing. I mean, Nirvana was active from, you know, 88 to 1994, but even in those 6 years, there's a progression there, both in the songs that they're writing and certainly the way that they played and the way that they presented those songs live. And I think that's always a really special thing when a band and an artist, or a band and an audience rather, can grow together. And you know, you can totally see the beginning of that relationship on this album.
Yeah. Let's see. At the bottom, I think we wrote down a Kurt quote that I'll take. It's a good time to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like you said, when you look at stuff, and people love hearing Kurt's words, and I think that, you know, when you listen to songs, you probably go to the lyrics pretty quick. But then I remember you texting me, you're like, you know, you can't understand what he's saying, and this is like peak, like,
and it's not about that either. On this,
it's not about that. And so Kurt said, it's like when I write a song, the lyrics to me are the least important thing. I can go through 2 or 3 different subjects in a song, and the title can mean absolute nothing at all. Sometimes I try to make things harder for myself, just to make myself a little bit more angry. I try out a few subconscious things, I suppose, like conflicts with other people. Most of the lyrics on the Bleach album are about my life in Aberdeen. And that I like that he put that most of the lyrics are about Aberdeen, because I think that's really important to the genesis of this band. And obviously, like, I mean, Kurt is the band, and like that time living in Aberdeen, his younger life. I mean, it all comes out in this album, and it is very apparent that, you know, you lived in, you know, this area in Seattle, outside of Seattle, Washington, that was very, say, you know, apart from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the thing.
different.
Like, it wasn't downtown Seattle where this stuff was born.
No.
It was Aberdeen. It was Ellensburg, Washington, with the trees. It was Bainbridge Island with Mother Love Bone and company. Like
the Bainbridge Island episode.
Yeah, man. The
Scott Crane,
birthplace.
you got to go listen to that. I think that I'm not with 165 or probably
something
earlier.
like that, because it was Scott Crane and Patty Warbucks that we had on.
Such a good episode to really understand. Like, I think, I mean, Kurt, there was a scene in Aberdeen that was going on, and yeah. Sorry, I cut you off there because I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to bring that up earlier too, with Dino.
That was episode 147 that we had Scott on, which might be my favorite episode that we've done so far this year.
Yes. And that'll help if you go back and listen to that, which I strongly do. It probably is one of the better episodes we've ever done, because it is real history about the Seattle sound. Mm-hmm. And this album, this type of music is a lot of what the kids like. It just shows you how learning an instrument, playing music with friends, and like what comes out on an album.
Yeah.
Like how that comes to be. Mm-hmm. And that's
well, that was the best part about it, because like, we're talking to Scott, who was a kid at the same time and place with these people, and he gave a perfect window into the emotions of the time and just kind of the consistent boredom that existed, that, you know, created the conditions for these albums to come out. And I think it's the same story with something like Bleach, and kind of talking about, you know, if you're a kid, if you're 19, 20 years old and this stuff's coming out, I mean, it's going to speak to you, and the energy in it is going to speak to you. And it's something to get excited about at a time where there really wasn't a ton to be excited about in these communities. So, you know, Bleach for sure serves to illuminate that landscape quite a bit, I would say.
Yeah. And this, you got to think, like, you know, music, so really heavy and like emotional. Teen angst is like what the term that gets used a lot. And I feel like in the 90s or 89, in the early 90s, when people were writing songs, and like when people said they were expressing themselves through this chaotic fuzz, all this stuff, it was very like genuine.
Yeah.
Where now people, like, they talk about writing like heavy stuff out of angst and stuff, and it's still produced to a manner. And I'm just, you know, like, this is very clear that it's like, you know, you have no one to talk to, you have nothing, like, all you can do is yell into a microphone and like play really loudly. I mean, it really was their escape.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know, it's just teen angst. It's viewed differently these days, and I don't buy it when people sometimes, basically.
Yeah, man, I would agree with that. And it's interesting too. I love that you brought up the point about how, like,
kids were in solitude.
Yeah, exactly. Like, isolation, not solid.
Like,
it's
isolation.
Tough out there.
Like when you were a kid back in the day, like, I mean, you
play video games. Yeah,
your neighbors. So you had your neighbors. That was your friend group. And if you didn't like your neighbor, that's still the only people that,
right?
Or however far you could ride your bike.
Too bad.
Yeah. Now you can find now you talk to, you know, it's different.
Yeah.
So
I have to say, I love that you brought up that, you know, it's said so many times that this was a way for like the kids to express themselves. And I think people get tripped up when they hear that, because they hear, oh, these people are expressing themselves, let's go listen to what they're saying. But like, if you listen to this album, for me, like, I mean, you listen to school, like somebody screaming no recess, like, okay, what's that about? Like, it's not about what they're saying. It's about that undeniable, powerful energy that exists on it. You know, it's not, you know, the words that they're saying, it's the sound that they're creating around it. And this is a hallmark of that, because I couldn't possibly tell you what any of these songs mean if there's a message in there. And honestly, coming from me who loves lyrics, I don't care what they're saying, because there's a feeling there that for me trumps that, you know, need to get analytical about what they're saying in the second verse. And I think that's what made it so accessible to those kids who grew up having those feelings at that time, and that existed on Bleach. And then when Nevermind came around, it was more polished, it was more accessible to everybody, not just the people that were growing up in these areas dealing with those very specific conditions.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the John Frusciante interview where he talks about Jimi Hendrix, and he said, if you want to get to know Jimmy, like you can talk to him or you can read his biography, or back in the day you could talk to him or you could whatever, but like the best way to really understand him is to listen to his music, and listen to him play, watch him play, and that is Jimmy. Like that is and that's how Kurt was. Like if you can talk to him and you're gonna get a little bit here and there, but the best insight to people, and like I said, the lyrics are not here nor there for a lot of times, but it's like how they perform and like what comes out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Bleach was the first look we had at these kids.
Yeah, it was a conscious choice too. It wasn't about making something that was going to sell a lot of records. It was about, serving the need that they had in themselves to just let it rip and let loose a little bit. And I'm glad they did.
Man, I love debut albums. I do.
Too, man.
I mean, that's like, that is the best part about this album is it's the debut.
Well, we talked about that
album.
with Alice in Chains' Facelift. It's like you have such an opportunity when you're, for the first time, you're putting something down, a big effort that's not just a single or a really small EP. Like this is like your chance to make a statement about like who you guys are, where you're coming from, and like what you want to convey. And you only get that opportunity once. And it's always interesting to go back and look. And I'm glad that we've taken the time today to go back and take a look at where Nirvana was and what they accomplished in their studio debut.
There's like no pressures, there's no expectations, you have the liberty of like, there's no mirror to look at, nothing to compare it to, where you're just kind of like, this could work. And then all of a sudden, then you get the ideas and the skeleton of what you need to work on. That's why you get a more concise, and you usually, you get your killer songs and the songs that leave in history on like the second and third albums, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. Man.
Awesome.
Bleach.
Do you want to read that last quote by Kurt in the 1993 Spin interview?
Yeah, just to put the cherry on top of the longer one that you read. In a 1993 interview with Spin Magazine, Kurt Cobain said, "I don't give a flying fuck what the lyrics are about." And honestly, like as somebody who skews to like, oh, what are they meaning by this? Like, it's good to have right from the horse's mouth. Like, if he doesn't give a fuck what they're about, I shouldn't either.
Who am I to say?
Yeah, who am I to say it? Like, you just gotta tune out to what they're saying and just turn the knob up a little bit. And get it right in between your ears, and I think that's the way this album is supposed to be played. So go back if it's been a while since you've listened to Bleach. Go turn that thing up, maybe in the car, or just blast it through your headphones, and see what you think about it. See how it makes you feel, and let us know.
Yeah, if only we did this episode on June 15th.
I know, man. We were asleep at the switch. We probably had some bullshit episode come out around that time that wasn't important. But you know what? We get to it in good time. No, actually, that's a lie. June 17th was Father's Day episode. Yeah.
We should have asked my dad about Bleach. First
Dave, what do you think about Bleach?
That'd be great. But so this is our ode to happy 35th anniversary to Bleach.
Yeah, man.
Pretty incredible. And we have it forever, so you guys can go and listen to it.
Right,
at least the beginning, first 5 tracks.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm ready to put a bow on Bleach.
Man, that was great. I think that would turn out great.
Yeah, I think that was solid. So if you're still with us, we'd like to thank you for sticking with us. I think we're almost at the hour mark here, as we tend to end up at. We would also like to thank our producer, Drew McFadden. We put his feet to the fire last week a little bit by recording on Sunday night, but
he requested that.
Ever steady, he did request that, and he delivered. Everything was right where we needed it come 6:30 a.m. Eastern on last Monday, and certainly this one will be very easy because this is only the 14th and this is coming out on the 19th. So thank you, Drew. Thanks to everybody who supports us by listening, by sharing it with a friend, by sharing it with an enemy, perhaps, by it's one of those things, Ethan. You know how generally speaking, if like you have a crush or something and like you send like your crush a music suggestion or something to try to impress them, I wonder if anybody's in the courting process trying to impress somebody. I wonder if anybody's ever sent a Grunge Bible podcast to somebody and how that
just
turned out.
show their edge, show their
like, I'm listening to these guys, they're talking about grunge. Like,
it's pretty underground. It's not that big yet. They don't have any corporate sponsors.
Exactly. So perhaps perhaps that's happening, or perhaps that's going to happen. But nevertheless, I think that was a quality episode, and I've got a song of the week. If you have a song of the week, and we can send the people out into the world.
Yeah. I have to say, and this may not be, I don't have exactly, okay, I can pick a song. I can pick maybe their top song, but recently, and this is a double-edged sword, or a dual threat, I guess. A while back, Liederman, our sage when it comes to heavy and the real stuff.
Yeah.
He told us, I remember him texting me and multiple times. He's like, you gotta listen to Gojira. He's like, you guys would love them. He's like, Ethan, you definitely love them. I'm like, okay. Like, I mean, I've heard it. I knew them, but I never really gave them a listen.
Yeah.
And like, it's just, there's so much music out these days. Like, I heard Tommy Lee on an interview. He's like, dude, there's like, I can't keep up. There's no, like, how do people keep up? There's just way too much. It needs to be less. And then of course they opened up the 2024 Olympics in Paris because they are a French heavy metal band. So I went to the Gojira Zone this week when I was lifting.
Nice.
And Chris, I have to say,
is it a winner?
I think they took the belt for the best overall band you can listen to in the weight room.
No kidding.
Yes, dude. They were absolutely perfect. I did put on Bleach for the second half, and it didn't hit like Gojira, man.
No, man.
They're just like, they're really heavy, but they're so precise, and they have incredible licks and riffs, and it's just, man, and every song was different that I was listening. I started from the top, so I went straight down. I mean, I just clicked on their top songs and stuff versus going right to the albums because I needed bangers. And man, they really did nail them. So their top song right now is Stranded, and that's the first song. So if you're out there and you're an enthusiast by Gojira, please direct me and Chris of where to go specifically. But I went right to the top, and Stranded is their number one viewed song, stream song right now, and it's off their 2016 album Magma. And man, it just cut so good. And yeah, I'm a believer. They're originally called Godzilla, and they changed their name to Gojira. So that's pretty sick too.
That is pretty sick.
Love some Godzilla lore.
That fires me up.
Yeah, so I am behind it, Chris. It's definitely next weight room session. That's where you got to go.
I will follow in your footsteps, and certainly because they're your footsteps, but they're also Eric Liederman's footsteps, and he
exactly.
taught us to stay heavy. So
yeah, exactly. If we're gonna say stay heavy at the end of this, we need it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Nice. That's a really solid addition.
You're up.
I'm up. I just posted this song right before we started recording. Yeah, no, Sifting is not going to be my song of the week, Ethan. I'm going to go to a song by The Hotelier. It is their first song on their first album, and the song is called Our Lives Would Make a Sad, Boring Movie, from their debut album, It Never Goes Out. These guys are from Worcester, Massachusetts. Worcester, representing. And yeah, man, I just love fucking like pop punk, emo, indie type stuff. And this one scratched an itch for me the last couple of days, and I've been listening to it a bunch. It's like a short burst of fascination like this that I had with this song that's probably going to make it place pretty highly on my Spotify top 100 songs at the end of the year. But it's a worthy fucking adversary, in the words of Walter Sobchak.
Nice.
Yeah, man.
That's awesome. I'm gonna listen to that right when we get off here, because I've never heard that one.
It's gonna be good stuff. So I think that'll do it for this episode of the Grunge Bible Podcast. Do you have any closing thoughts, Ethan?
Well, yeah, you brought up Spotify end of the year Wrapped, and as we know, Delicate Steve was high on my list this past year, and he has a new album that comes out.
Excellent.
Friday, was it 17th?
Yep.
So it'll be out
16th.
by the time it comes out for this this album, and I want to plug him because I think the title is Delicate Steve Speaks because he never sings. He hasn't sung on
Does he sing on this one?
I don't know, but
I hope not.
They released two songs and he didn't sing on either of them. So, but I posted something on my personal story. I just like threw up his post. I didn't even tag or do anything, and he liked it, or the account liked it. So that's huge. That's huge.
That's
man.
Very delicate of him.
He's very delicate. He doesn't get out much. So I'm pretty pumped for that, and I'm hoping.
Dude, that happened to me once. I posted
I didn't even tag him. Like
I don't know how they do this. Like I posted, it might have been on Grunge Bible or it might have been on my own, but I posted a song Spotify link to a James Legg song, and Mr. Legg himself liked it. And then like the next story that I posted,
I didn't know this, Chris.
I don't. Yeah, and
that's huge.
Yeah, dude. The next story I posted, I think it like. At the time, I posted like a Nina Simone song on Grunge Bible or something, and he replied to it, and he's like, "The best." And I was like, "You said it, James Legg." He's always like, he's lurking.
Let's get him on. Holy shit, dude!
James Legg, man.
Dude, we gotta fire off that flare. That's awesome. I did not know that. Huge. See, like, okay, I mean, if Foo Fighters, I guess, or Pearl Jam, or if some of them liked art, we'd probably be talking the same. But man, a little bit smaller artists or smaller following type of stuff, it's just. I don't know. You know it's them behind the screen. You know.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you know it was James Legg. Just like hopefully it was Delicate Steve.
You must have met me when I was dancing.
I was out on the floor just dancing.
I love it, dude.
Yeah,
my gosh,
that's great.
Great ending to a great episode. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and we will see you same time, same place next week.
You better believe it. Well done, Ethan. Thanks everyone for listening. And in the words of Eric Liederman. Stay heavy.
Stay heavy.
Fuck yeah. See you, everybody.